Welcome to the podcast about podcasts. And no, that's not a typo, it's a double entendre. To make sure we're all on the same page before we get started, let's cover a few definitions. Pod, an elongated seed vessel of a leguminous plant such as the pea, splitting open on both sides when ripe. Caste, a social class separated by distinctions of hereditary rank, profession, or wealth. Ergo, podcasts are the heretofore unwritten hierarchy of podcasts separated by distinctions of quality, content, and sophistication. So you may be asking, what is this hierarchy? Let me explain. Each caste is populated by several breeds or species or categories of podcasts. We'll cover each of these categories in a moment. The upper caste consists of the elite, the cream of the crop, and come in the form of the squad caste and the plod caste. The middle class are the average Joes of the podcast world. They aren't rolling around in the mud, but they're a little rough around the edges. Meet the nod caste, the pod blast, and the mod caste. The lower caste is literally the bottom rung on the podcast ladder. These bottom feeders come in the form of the prod caste, the shod caste, and the wad caste. Now that you know the order, you're ready to meet each of the podcasts. Let's start at the top. First, we find the squad caste. These are podcasts where more than one person helps present the material. Think of this one as a team effort, like the Stuff You Should Know podcast with Josh Clark and Chuck Bryant, or Radio Lab with Jad Abumrad and Robert Krulwich. Good stuff. The last of the upper caste is the plod caste. These usually consist of one person droning on and on and on and on about a certain topic, usually a little dry, but still sophisticated. The first in the middle caste is the nod caste. Basically, this podcast is an extended endorsement, giving a nod or a shout out to a group, idea, or something of the like. Still a good podcast, just a little low brow. Next is the mod caste. This is a podcast that's trying to be something it isn't. It's like the people who wear sunglasses inside because they think it makes them look cool. It doesn't. These podcasts are trying a little too hard to be hip. It's sort of like Microsoft trying to be Apple. It doesn't work. The pod blast is at the low end of the middle caste and is dedicated to lambasting, attacking, or otherwise belittling whatever it has its sights set on. Picture a Rush Limbaugh podcast about the Democrats and you've just about got it. In the lower caste, we find the prod caste, devoted to pushing or selling or guilting or otherwise prodding you to believe or act in a certain way. It's like PETA and a greasy used car salesman all rolled into one. Next, we have the shod caste. These podcasts are defined by their poor production quality. If we can hear your cat purring into the microphone or your kids watching TV while you record a podcast, it's a shodcast. Last and most certainly least is the wadcast. This podcast is quite literally trash. Whether it's subject matter that never should have left the gutter or an idea that never should have made it to the drawing board, a wadcast is, to its core, garbage. That concludes our tour of the podcast system. Thanks for joining. Oh, and just to clarify, before you start thinking that I approve of or agree with the caste system, I don't. But just because I don't agree with it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I'm simply explaining a naturally occurring process. More like social science and less like social bigotry. Thanks for listening.